I rule it back in order, and we yield 15 minutes to Representative Julia Brown.
We're making history here. I've never been yielded.
The longest time Congress has ever yelled at anybody.
So thank all of my constituents who are here today, and I guess convincing the chairman to give me 15 minutes, so I will absolutely take it. So along the line of questioning that we have been on here, I wanted to ask about memory care. I think probably it's a fair statement to say that the VA is probably behind and needs some catching up in terms of providing the appropriate memory care needs. I know that there is some dementia care in some of our facilities across the country. VA-run facilities like the community living centers. I think we offer dementia services there. In terms of just locally, do we provide dementia services in LA or Sepulveda?
Both of those sites exist. It depends on what severity level they're in.
Yeah, you're not on.
In the early phases, we have things such as Wonder Guards, but we do not have a dedicated, secure unit. And that's been some of the challenges, because they're also sparse in the community as well. So that is one area that we're looking at.
So, and one area that you're looking at more opportunities for community partnership?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. And we're not talking a lot about the caregiver program today here in this hearing, but as I mentioned, we have spoken a lot about the caregiver program back in Washington, D.C. And to me, I think and I think for all the members on really both sides of the aisle, it's a matter of equity to have the post 9/11 men and women receive the caregiver services if that is something that they want. And so we expanded that caregiver service. Now I understand that the caregiver services wasn't under the umbrella of long-term care, because if you're doing, pre-9/11, it's going to be younger men and women generally who are receiving that care. It's probably because they're quite physically disabled and need the help and assistance. But as we open this up to post 9/11 veterans, it's going to be an older clientele of which we're going to serve. So I'm just wondering if there's any conversation about once this program gets instituted and fully up to speed, are you thinking about potentially merging the caregiver program under the auspices of all of these long-term care programs?
At the local level, it would make sense for us to make it under non-institutional care, essentially, especially as we roll out. Because the nice thing with the caregiver program is they go in and make sure the home's safe. They give training to the caregiver, make sure the caregiver is able to. And as you do that, as you imagine with aging spouses and other challenges, that's something that will be important so that you can make sure of the safety of the home and other issues. So that'll be an extra plus for many of our veterans.
Okay. And what is the VA doing with regards to memory care and trying to assess that and looking at a well-articulated plan to move forward? Dr. Boyd?
So you hit on something that's really been very much in the forefront since my very short time in my new role as well. We have a lot of catch up to do there. We do have dementia care. We had our prior with our geriatrics evaluation management clinics, and primarily that really dealt with our dementia in our elderly patients, our more frail patients. What we've learned from our MyREC partners, and that's another acronym, but our mental health innovation centers, as well as our geriatric centers of innovation, is that we can definitely buff up and improve early on. Again, I'm talking about moving it back to the left. When we first see signs, let's be more sensitive to that and see those flags before we get down the road where now we have to have institutional care. So we are looking at that. I don't have it in front of me, but there's significant research as well in this area. And one thing that I do want to mention is that and this really goes to our community partners as well. With regards to dementia and the behavior issues that we many times see, unfortunately, that keeps a lot of our veterans, many of our veterans, from being able to go to the community in a less restrictive or institutionalized setting than they would like. And what we've learned, we have 5 visits now where we've had this innovation program of behavioral recovery outreach teams that are actually going to interface, if they would, with the community. If we have a veteran in one of our CLCs, our community living centers, that they really could, with the proper attention and continuation of goals of care and their treatment, could actually function at a less restrictive area, and that's where they want to be. Then what we would do, we actually send VA folks to that setting, that non-VA setting, to work with them. Actually have those folks come in and see the veteran in their then surroundings. So we work with them on the behavior and some of the memory issues, so they don't rebound or need hospitalization as well. So again, it's about veteran preference. So that's an innovative idea, and we need more like that.
Thank you, Dr. Hartranft. I listed out all of these programs, non-institutional, institutional. Can you give me an assessment? Are all of these programs available here in Ventura County?
Currently, no. At this point, we do not offer veteran-directed care services. Specifically, what we do instead is use a combination of the other non-institutional care programs to provide the care that the veterans need. Another opportunity is the one that Dr. Boyd just mentioned. It's not a specific NIC program, but it's the behavior outreach, which I think will help us work with our community partners even better. I guess Ventura County, we specifically have the state veterans homes are the primary ones that I can find right now that's primarily here in Ventura County.
So, but some of the other programs that we've mentioned here today could be available to veterans. I mean, it's not there. My guess, I don't have the data.
Working with our community partners are so important.
Okay, very good. In terms of the Calvet home here, which we all take a lot of pride in, and I've been to that facility many, many times and see lots of happy veterans there and their families. And it is also, Dr. Dunn, these veterans can also have their spouses at this facility, so it's really a wonderful place. I'm curious to know what California's Department of Veteran Affairs does to look at the data, establish needs throughout the state of California, and sort of what the process is. Are you building any new homes in the state of California, or is this something that was great in its day, but we're never going to expand upon it?
Okay, sure. So, yeah, as you know, the Ventura Veterans Home was opened, I believe, in 2009. It was part of a wave of 5 new veterans homes that were built between 2009 the last wave.
When's the next wave? And where
We're
is
not
it?
prepared for that, to answer that question yet. So there was a needs assessment done about 15 years prior to determine the future programming needs, and that's where skilled nursing was identified. Secure memory care units were identified, which is how we tripled our capacity in a handful of years. And right now we're taking a step back, having opened all these new facilities, having finished construction and ramp up. We're taking a step back and taking a look at the data to see where the numbers really lead us. Keeping in mind industry changes and VA directional changes in terms of non-institutionalized care. But also identifying that there are plenty of veterans who really need a nursing home or secure unit or something similar where other non-institutional programs don't quite work for them. So we're going through this needs assessment process right now. We've actually had some great support from the VA in getting data and subject matter expertise, and we're hoping for a study to be finished on time by the end of next year.
Okay, and so I just want to bifurcate here. Long-term plan, you're going to have it next year, but just in terms of veteran homes, is that incorporated into that plan? So in a year we would sort of know what the CalVet plan is for new homes throughout the state?
Correct, yes, so
Okay.
we
All right.
that's
good.
that's
Okay, that's good. So, you know, just in terms of this long-term care and some collaboration with the VA, and you're collecting all of this data. The VA is collecting the data, as is CalVet, and how are the two agencies collaborating? How are they using it? I mean, obviously, you've just said there's going to be a report. Maybe I should ask the VA in terms of, are you going to have a report also where this collaboration can come from?
As far as the state goes, that would be with the area VA medical center directors with regards to any plans for the state veterans home here within California.
So maybe I should speak to. So we received some support from. I know you have a data analysis unit in your headquarters in DC. So we received support from them for collecting this data for our use of report. And
I just think that you know, the CalVet raises an important issue. I think, you know, the fact that you're drawing on the data to create a long-term plan is really important. I also think that as we go through this, we're gonna, in terms of the VA servicing veterans, we're gonna find gaps in those services. And so I think the way to fill those gaps is through community-based programs with CalVet and more collaboration. And I think that there's probably, in some cases, greater efficiency and better use of the taxpayer dollars, you know, in this collaboration, making sure that don't have duplication. And so I guess I'm really kind of looking for, are we, you know, are these words on a piece of paper, or are we actually, you know, engaged in collaboration in terms of where we can, how we can best collectively serve our veterans?
So our process is we're still in the infancy of our process right now. So we're going to be in a more robust stakeholder process and community engagement process as part of our project. So again, it's very early right now. We're trying to get broad numbers to get a sense of what data already exists, so we're not reinventing the wheel. And then based out of that, then it's going to be a matter of applied analysis, applied science.
Okay, Dr. Boyd, you know, before we close out this hearing, I wanted to ask you directly about the USA Today reporting relative to the nursing home ratings, and I think Dr. Dunn cleared up some of this in his opening comments, but in that particular article it said that Sepulveda had a 3-star rating, the VA rating is a 5-star rating, is my understanding. At least based on the VA data here, that's what it is.
So on the Sepulveda was actually 5-star?
Yeah.
Yes, and the GLA was actually a 4-star?
A 4-star.
Yes, ma'am.
And so in the article, the article states that you know, it's an issue around transparency and getting this information out, so when people are making decisions, they have the best information in front of them. And I think that there's some agreement in terms of the VA of making sure that we do put out this information. It was also mentioned in several of the articles that there might be, that VA had underlying data that might shed light on how VA develops its nursing home ratings and why some VA facilities seem to score lower when compared to their private counterparts. And there was, I think, a commitment and a promise for a report to be out by July 1st. Are you aware of this report that the VA committed to?
Yes, ma'am, and this report is actually posted on a public-facing website at www.
Okay. So there was one report, but then there was supposed to be another sort of backup report that would shed, I think, more light on the process. And I think that second one was supposed to be released on July the 1st.
So what you may be inferring is the redacted Long-Term Care Institute records that went into the specifics of the quality metrics. That takes some time to get those redacted because they have patient information in them. That's probably what you're talking about.
All right. And so in terms of nursing home ratings that don't have very good scores, I think we're fortunate here that we have two that do. And it sounds like our community partner scores are generally pretty good, at least that's what Mr. McManus reported. But what are we doing? What are we doing to kind of rectify the situation and improve upon those who have the lower scores?
Okay, so a couple of
It
things.
sounds pretty urgent to me.
Yeah, and thank you for that question. And so about a year ago, as you know, VA did get on the journey to adopt CMS, that's the Center of Medicare and Medicaid Services, a methodology with which to have a star rating. And it's basically divided up into 3 areas. And you're right, we did very well. We fared very well with the private sector in 2 of the 3 sections, that being on our annual surveys or accreditation, as well as our nurse staffing model. We did have some opportunities in the quality measurement section. That's the 3rd of the 3 areas that figure into the overall scoring. In fact, 11 of our sites scored only 1 star in the quality measurement area. And what we've done is this, we took a deep dive in that. And what we found is that, and by the way, if you go onto the Medicare site as well, they actually have a disclaimer saying that it's not a one and done. That's not the one thing that families should look at. Totally, it is a starting point. It's a snapshot in time of for CMS of patient care at that time. What we found was that we had not done a very good job of documenting, because it's not something that we had really disciplined ourselves for. The other thing is that our case mix and our CLCs, our community living centers, is quite different than in the private sector. As many of you know, it's no surprise we have spinal cord injury patients that we absolutely will care for in our CLCs. And we have hospice care within our CLCs as well, and we will care for them. And also, we have serious mentally ill residents as well that do require some of the antipsychotic medications. Those 3 major categories increase the complexity of our case mix, and there will skew some of the numbers. That's not, it's not a defense at all by any means, it's not an excuse, it's reality. And so after we clear up our documentation, which we hope that will really reflect the quality of care that all of our residents are receiving, is currently not being seen in the chart, and hopefully that will improve that. And we do look forward to having congressional visits to all of our CLCs so you can see the quality of care delivered there.
Well, and I hear what you're saying and concur with what you're saying to some degree, but I think it's important in many respects for the VA to compare themselves to the private sector. I think that that's important, and I do believe that veterans, our customers, our patients are typically, the cases are more complicated, and certainly have cases that you're not going to see as frequently in the private industry. But then I would argue we need higher standards for our veterans because their cases are complicated and they're dealing with an abundance of different issues. And so therefore we should be far above and certainly not behind comparatively. And we have certainly spoken, had many hearings in Washington about the overuse of drugs and medication and opioid addiction. And this is Dr. Dunn is one of his favorite topics. And you know, if we're showing that we're over-medicating, and we may need to over-medicate slightly more than in private industry, but that's a real concern. As it was reported in USA Today, and I want to make sure that we get down to the bottom of it. And so I have exceeded my 15 minutes, and so I yield back to the chairman. Thank you very much.
Well,
I won't tell any of my members back in Washington
you cannot
we've made
reveal how long this went over in Washington. I'll be pilloried. So I yield to myself 15 minutes. Ms. Krull, I have a couple quick questions for you noted that a lot of your veterans are at risk for skilled nursing placement and that the services you provide delay their nursing home placement. Do you have a sense of how much you're able to delay that placement?
Yes, I do. We, in some cases, completely avoid placement. So our care is, in some cases, absolutely, if not for us, the person would have been placed. So our care, with all the meals, with all the nursing care, with all the personal care, allows that veteran to live at home and continue.
So I know it's difficult. Have you developed a way to average the delay? Is there any way to quantify that? I understand it's a difficult metric.
Yes and no. And we have several veterans who absolutely with us for several years and will be in the nursing home if not here. So these several years of quality of life and living at home is there. Some people who start with us sometimes decline so much that our level of care is not appropriate for them anymore, and then we refer them to
But there's substantial savings for all the time that they're
absolutely.
So let me ask you another question. Do you have work with any of the VA caregiver coordinators, the ones we were talking about earlier? Do you give, in terms of respite for them, the caregiver coordinator?
What we work, how we work with.
I mean, well, obviously, what you're doing is you're taking that veteran patient
Yes.
that they're
Yes.
coordinating care for. Are you giving respite to the care coordinators as well?
And we absolutely do, just because we have a social work department, and that social work department coordinates care with the Department of Veteran Affairs. So people who would provide that care at home or otherwise don't need to do that. So our social workers coordinate everything what the veteran needs. We call directly to Department of Veteran Affairs. Social workers, they have very strong clinical staff, and they help us a lot with the coordinating care of the veteran.
Very good. So something we were talking about a little earlier, there was the memory care, and it keyed in me some one of the things that VA does as a you're gun shy.
Yeah, something moved quickly.
Yeah, but I think it gave me that VA has another mission, which is research, and we actually have a fairly large research program across the country. And some of that research is focused on dementia, Alzheimer's, TBI, PTSD, all the various mental problems that are so common in our veterans. I know you do research in the GLA MedSen. Do you do research on those areas?
Yes, sir. Between our MyRec, which is the mental illness type of research, and also the geriatric research, some of our caregivers look at everything from traumatic brain injury to aging, and also more of the social factors many times, like the things like having a caregiver and then this respite and adult day health care, because one of the factors of increasing your chance of veterans' chance of being institutionalized is caregiver burnout. So there's so many variables.
I get that. So, but now that you're doing clinical trials down there in LA, what's the availability up here in Ventura to participate in those clinical trials with these veterans up here?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that is another area we could.
Are either Calvet or Mr. Ramirez, you guys aware of any availability of clinical trials inside the Veterans Administration up here in Ventura? So Ventura patients. No? Okay, good. All right, so GLA is fortuitously located and very close proximity to some world-class academic centers that are doing research in this very area, UCLA, Sinai, USC, etc. Do you work with them?
With the community partners, you mean, sir?
No, in research.
Yes, UCLA and many of our partners, we overlap in many of the areas with aging and also traumatic brain injury and other areas, yes, sir.
So in my experience, we used to share a lot of faculty back and forth. Does that still happen?
Yes, sir.
All right. I was thinking about prostate cancer myself, my own niche of interest in medicine. You have some amazing prostate cancer research going on in LA with researchers at the institutions I mentioned. Are they working with your center?
Yes, sir. We have a lot of overlap with them, NIH funding, VA funding. It is a significant.
So the VA funding is course, of immediate interest to us, but also the NIH funding. Often they collaborate on the same programs. And this stuff is deep, deep, deep in the veterans. And it's actually also, attached to the Agent Orange concerns and whatnot as well, prostate cancer. So I mean, that's an area that is of keen concern. And if these veterans up here in Ventura could participate in those clinical trials, I think that would be I think that'd be a benefit for them. And they're not going to find any better, deeper, more knowledgeable faculties than are available right here in this VISN, not the county, but the VISN. So that's an important thing to put on the radar. And I'd like to come back, actually. I've been out here a number of times on prostate cancer as a civilian. I guess I'd have to come back as a Veterans Administration official. Turn my thoughts one more time to a fond subject I was reminded when the gentleman walked in, the K-9 services. How much do they cost, like on a per vet basis? Who knows that? And so this is typically for PTSD, mental health. Nobody has a feeling for that number, no granular numbers on that? That ought to be something we know. I mean, we all like it. I'm a dog person, I like dogs. But I think we ought to have a feeling for what the cost is on that. Do you have a feeling for what diagnoses the K-9 assistance program is applicable to other than PTSD? Nobody? Dr. Boyd?
So in fact, it can be for any need, any clinical need or psychosocial need that the veteran has.
So, I mean, it's always anxiety
or seizures.
Seizure.
I mean, it could be for a lot of different things. Yes, sir.
Diabetes. This is good. All right. Well, so we're going to be visiting the GLA Medicine, or if not the Medicine, the long-term care centers this afternoon. We certainly look forward to getting down there and talking with you. Do you have any more pressing questions? And it's not
I just had one
you
quick
do.
question.
Look at this.
I apologize, but
I yield to Representative Brown.
So, Dr. Dunn and I were in a hearing, I think it was last week, and what we were discussing was some rule changes around prosthetics. And in some of the testimony, and Dr. Boyd, this question is really for you. And I don't know whether you're aware of some of the proposed rule changes with regards to prosthetics, but in testimony coming from many, it was stated that in the rule change, that issues like metal alert devices or personal emergency response systems or medical ID bracelets may no longer be provided to veterans by the VA because of the way this rule has been changed. And we, the committee members, argued very strongly against this, that this would be a very dangerous road to travel, and how important that is, particularly as we're talking about today. And the reason I'm bringing it up, it's about veterans staying in home. So I'm just wondering if you could comment if indeed the VA goes through with this rule change, what are the impacts going to be on institutionalized care or long-term care services?
Thank you for the question. I am not familiar with the legislation and the technical.
It's not legislation; it's rule changes.
The rule change.
That was promulgated in-house at the VA.
So I'm not familiar with that. I definitely am interested. You sparked my interest in that, especially with the conversation here today. I'd like to take that for the record and definitely get back to you. I wrote it down, and that's one that really bring up a good point. So
I mean, I think Dr. Dunn and we were definitely on the same wavelength, and I think that based on this discussion, my takeaway was there was a big disconnect between the lawyers and the clinicians, and that we need to get to the bottom of it. But weighing in on issues, that are under your jurisdiction would be very helpful in terms of ensuring that we get it right.
I'll definitely take that back.
Yeah, let
Thank
me
you.
associate myself with those remarks because it doesn't make sense. And it really was, it appeared to be a very heavy-handed unilateral rules-making exercise that took no input from the VSOs, no input from Congress. So I think if you could go back and correct the direction of the ship on that, that would be greatly appreciated. Let me tell you, we're going to adjourn this, but we will make ourselves available for some few minutes, certainly, and our staff's here available, and I hope you'll take advantage of also the outstanding witness panel that we have to ask questions of them. Thank you all very much for this productive and enlightening hearing. I can assure you that the future of VA long-term care and the quality of that care, which you seem to enjoy at an unusually high level of here in Ventura, will continue to be a focus of this subcommittee. Thank you to the ranking member, Representative Judy Brownlee. Thank you for requesting this hearing in the first place, and I've enjoyed getting out of DC for a little while and seeing what the good folks on the West Coast are doing for fun. If there's no further questions, we're now excused, and I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material. Without objection, that is so ordered. This hearing is now adjourned.